So up to now, we've just been using our 3D renders. We're now going to put some 2D elements in. We're using the technique we saw in the last module, where I've created a position to points. Remember, as I've done a denoise, I got world positions and world normals for free. So I'm looking at that through my camera. There's my camera 1, and I'm moved away, and what I've done is I've created a couple of cards, and they are literally just cards. There's one, and there's another one. Now on these cards I've got some smoke. Now I again obtained this as free stock footage from mitchmartinez.com, and I have graded it down, desaturated it and graded it a bit more, made it more dramatic. I'm going to turn these blend mats off just to show you what they're for. So without them, what you get is smoke, but when you put another card in front, it just goes in front of it and it's an over essentially. If I add this blend mat and change it to plus, they add together. So I get the result of both of these smokes added together. And they're at different distances. So with this dolly shot we get some parallax between the two. We get some parallax between the two smoke elements. So this is our Atmos, and we're moving through it at high speed. We probably want to move it at slightly slower speed, I'm hoping, in your version of this shot. And that depends on how long you have to render the 3D, of course. And then we have the fog render. And so this is actually our volumetrics out of V-Ray. And I've used the grade node to really pump them up, make them really contrasty. And then I have multiplied that by the real smoke element. So what you get, and with the screen recording you probably can't see it very well, so I'm just going to expose you up a bit. What you get is real smoke moving along with the 3D camera and being occluded correctly. So rather than trying to tweak the environment fog to be perfect and to have realistic smoke effects, I've actually managed to use smoke elements. And if I had the elements, I would have probably added some kind of dust element, have small particles of dust and fluff. If you look by your window in the morning, you'll see how little bits of dust catch the light, and that can be quite an interesting effect with volumetrics. So see if you can find something with some of those and make something really interesting. Find your own stock footage, make this your own. And then I have applied it. Now there are two things I've done to composite it. I've keyed the smoke, let's turn down that, and created an alpha, and that alpha is applied to a blur. So wherever we have smoke, the smoke is softening the image behind it, and that's what smoke does. Light gets dispersed as it hits smoke particles. So there's a blur. So the Luma key is a mask input to the blur node. I've then screened the smoke on. Screen is not physically accurate like a plus. It's a conditional statement. Essentially it says if it's not going to go over 1, then add it, but don't let it go over 1. So essentially it's a hack. It comes from the days of 8-bit, not having HDR images, not having 32-bit float. It allows you to add things up without burning them out. So it can be used to combine mats. In this case, it's a great way to composite smoke. People tell you screen is not physically accurate, and that is true. However, remind them that any DOP who ever films smoke on a film set will backlight the smoke. Real smoke is not backlit, but DOPs always backlight smoke in movies. So screen gives you a really good equivalence to that kind of movie smoke. It may not look like real smoke, but it looks like movie smoke. So screen is great. Moving down, I have done the same thing again, this time with a smoking gun. So this time I've got another card, and I've got another smoke element, which is a much finer smoke, probably from a cigarette or something. Now it may not be accurate to gun smoke. Those of you that are gun experts will probably contest my gun smoke, but I've got this smoke element. I've applied a retime node to find the bit of it, because it's a very long shot. I found the bit of it that I like, which is this bit. I've created a roto mask, and then I've given that a feather, which is negative 800 pixels, because this is a 4K element. So I've done that. Now, the problem with smoke elements is unfortunately they very often touch the side of the shot, which is really annoying. No one ever shoots them way over resolution. So it's quite common to have to create some soft mask to get your smoke element in. Now I've put that on the card and I'm viewing that through my camera, which is again from my Alembic for Cam 10. Note that I've renamed the shot we've been working on shot 20, and so this is shot 10. We count in tens so that if we decide later to edit in another shot between them, that can be shot 15. If there's a shot between 10 and 15, we can call that shot 12 and so forth. So we've got a bit of space. I've composited that in almost exactly the same way. However, I've got another little bit of jiggery pokery. One of the problems with this gunsmoke element is that it's behind the glass, and if I were to switch off some of my bits, I'm going to switch off all of this stuff, then what you see is that the smoke behind the glass looks exactly the same as the smoke that's not behind the glass, and that's really wrong. Now we could somehow render this through 3D to get accurate refractions, but we can cheat them in 2D, and this is how. I've taken this and the beauty with all my passes, and I've blurred every single layer. So this blur is blurring every layer, every pass. And then from there I've taken the reflection filter. Now the red, green and blue are the same in the reflection filter, so that gives us where things are reflective. And I've taken the refraction green, so the green value from the refraction, that's again just an arbitrary decision, and I've pumped them into forward U and forward V. So these UV values power what is called an iDistort. This is a distortion which takes those UV channels and then distorts the image based on whatever values it finds. So it's not in any way physically accurate. Let's turn that off, and as I scale it up, you can see it gets warped around by those values. So it's not accurate refractions, but it sort of looks like refractions. Where it's behind the glass, it looks different from where it's not behind the glass. And I've also applied a defocus to where it's behind the glass as well. And then I've graded the smoke. I've again keyed the smoke and used that limited to where the glass is. So without that the key goes beyond the glass. Here it goes behind it. So there we go, and we've blurred everything. So without that you get blurring within the glass, which is wrong because the glass is in front of the smoke. So here we get this nice blurring effect where smoke passes in front of things. Now I could really crank that up to just show you what it does. It can pull out different values a little bit, make the smoke a bit stronger. And then I've again screened smoke again. So again, not physically accurate, but kind of looks cool, and it's very much what a DOP would do with their backlit smoke. Going down, we have lens effects and motion blur. So not all of these are coming from our passes. The first one that we're going to look at, I'm just going to ignore these for a minute and view the start of this here. So we've got our smoke, we've got everything, but it's not being shot through any kind of lens. I've got lens distortion. Now real cameras are not like CG cameras. They're bits of glass, they're imperfect, they bend the image slightly. Now if you're matching a plate, you will need to match lens distortion. Now when you do that using a grid or using straight lines within your image, what you can do is keep that data. So you create a lens distortion node and you just keep the values. Now you can just put any values in here. What I've done is I've taken another VFX shot I worked on and I sampled it using grid analysis because I had a checkerboard grid. And so if you shoot a checkerboard with a camera, the grid will be bent, and I've just taken those values, and because it's similar to the camera I want to simulate, I've just applied that. So I've used now what that does without the reformats is as it shrinks the image, bending it in, it creates these nasty edges, and this is a common problem you get in Nuke if you're not careful. It's a common gotcha. So what I've done first is I've used a reformat to scale the image up. So you see we go from HD 720 to being a bit bigger. We're in fact 2% bigger. And then I've applied it and I've pulled it in, and now I've got the nasty edges. But remember, these nasty edges are bigger than the original format. I've created another reformat, and the resize type here is none. So that simply chops off those nasty edges. We're within our original 720 format, but we've got this nice lens bending effect, which makes it look a little bit more optical and a little bit less CG. I have copied in the depth pass, and I've copied in the velocity pass. I've got a vector, I'm going to turn that grade off. I've got a vector blur, which gives me a motion blur, but I'm going to just disable that for a minute to look at the depth. So here we have our Z defocus. So we've seen this before. There is just one couple of differences with the setup. So let's look at the Z defocus. So if we change from result to layer setup, sorry, to focal plane setup, you will see that it's ignoring our smoke, and that's because the smoke is not in the render. So V-Ray had no way of knowing about the smoke that we're adding. So what I've done is I've used my key of the gun smoke, and I've used that as a mask. So here's my gun smoke, here's my luma key, here's my alpha, and what I've done is I've plugged that into a grade node, and that is not grading the RGB, that's grading the depth. So if I go up here in the viewer and view the depth, there's the depth without the grade, and with it switched on, it grades to kind of match the values in the glass. And I've done that looking at this focal plane setup. So you can see I've brought some of the smoke into focus. Again, I don't know exactly where that smoke would be in 3D. So is it physically accurate? No, but it kind of works. It kind of looks right. And if it looks right, it is right. So there we are. Z defocus. On and off. So we have some smoke out of focus, some smoke in focus, which is what we should have. And I've also applied motion blur because, of course, we have this crazy fast move. That takes a while to calculate. And then I've rendered it out. So now we have created our shot 10. What we want to do is see how we can use our setup to efficiently create shot 20. And that's what we're going to do in the next clip.